Huge crowds turned out and braved the rain to catch a glimpse of the Pope. It's the first papal visit to Japan for nearly 4 decades. In Nagasaki, the pontiff laid a wreath at a Ground Zero memorial for the tens of thousands of people, including 8,000 Catholics, who perished in an atomic bombing in the final days of World War II. Francis told the crowds that he believes a world without nuclear weapons is both possible and necessary, and the money spent on them could be put to better use.
In today's world, where millions of children and families live in inhumane conditions, the money that is squandered and the fortunes made through the manufacture, upgrading, maintenance and sale of even more destructive weapons are an affront crying out to heaven.
The pontiff is also visiting Hiroshima, the site of the first atomic bombing in 1945. On Monday, Pope Francis will meet survivors of the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. He'll also meet Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Emperor Naruhito. And he will be hoping that they, and other global leaders, heed his calls for a nuclear-free world.
And to discuss the Pope's visit, I'm joined by our religious affairs correspondent, Martin Gack. This is the first papal visit in 38 years to Japan. What do you think the significance is for the Christians of Japan?
Well, I think that this is an important moment for the Christians of Japan, among other things, because over the last sort of 20, 30 years, they have lost about 10% of the population. It has actually been reduced by from 500,000 to about 450 or so. And quite clearly, it is a pattern that the church sees not only sort of in Japan, but around the world. So I think that one of the reasons why the Pope is there is to try to regain terrain. Obviously, this also has a regional projection, particularly probably in relation to China, where the the Catholic community is under quite a bit of pressure, as it has historically been. So I think that in the regional context, this visit is quite important.
And just before the Pope got there, the Japanese Catholic Church criticized Japanese society for being too materialistic. What do we make of that?
Well, I mean, the criticism was against materialism and excessive consumption and competition. So I think that there is a general sense, and this is something that has been sort of following this Vatican, this Pope for now, since the beginning of the papacy, that the question of unbridled capitalism is something that is essentially directly or diametrically opposed to, ideas of spiritual growth and sort of the well-being of people around sort of the more classical institutions of church life. And Japan, in some sense, is sort of a linchpin precisely of that kind of development or of that kind of industrialization consumption. So I think that that was sort of the criticism. And, it's one that is consistent with the position of the last few years.
Okay, thanks so much for that. DW's religious affairs reporter, Martin Gack.